Hey everyone, it's another video I've been working on for a while, at least planning for a while. And it's one of the bigger ones. The other, her ended up pushing back a whole month, so I have more time to work on it. But this one is especially appropriate given what time of year it is, with the 25th anniversary of the franchise this year, and many, many films celebrating the silver anniversary. Hey, I thought I would give another her franchise's treatment with this format that people seem to be liking lately. So here are my takeaways from this statement. How I watched every Final Destination movie, including Bloodlines, in 2025. I've since I'm not going to be going over every single whole event in these films, especially with every single disaster, but I will talk about what stood out at me, as well as give my brief thoughts what I think about each movie from my quality perspective, including with the one I just finished watching, which, like a lot of people, pleasantly surprised me. So, let's begin. The first movie, released in the year 2000, establishes the a core premise right off. I mean, after a young college student narrowly avoids disaster by seeing a premonition of his and others' deaths. As death is coming for them one by one, and, and to finish the job. So by design, it's a franchise that is built around having a different cast of characters with each installment. While normally this would not be ideal, you know, they actually managed to use a very effective way of doing that by casting relatively unknown actors who, as the mains, who at most might have had some minor roles in television, and and as well as casting named ones that were less in demand. And with this case being the a forensic coroner, or Dr. John Bloodworth, played by the late great Tony Todd. And yes, I will address as his how they dealt with his exit in the final installments as well, and but as well as the other theories surrounding him. So, with that being the case, is the whole scene of the of the plane getting ejected from Flight 180 before it correctly positioning crashes after it takes off, and it's really easy to see how just over a year later concerns about disasters in the air were taken much more seriously. He and I once again relay the story of how the first time I flew a commercial in 2003. I'll get more on that in a few months as well. Is when they checked my Game Boy case to make sure nothing extra was in there besides what you expect to see with a console, like Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Sonic Advance, and in my case, Lego Racers 2. And I mean, to me, the most effective disasters in each film are the ones that are the right mixture of being both spectacular to watch as well as potentially believable to make the horror or or realistic. I mean, if you make things a bit too mundane, and it doesn't end up being much for the viewer. But if you go too over the top, which is a problem that some of the other sequels had, I'll be addressing in a few moments, since it tends to go in some disbelief. But overall, oh, there are definitely ones that have urgency towards them, such as the a near miss on a train crash as near the end of the film, and of course, there's also a component of dark comedy. Some of these ones I'm about to explain are not intentional, but others are. Hence, one of the people being chosen getting hit by a bus, and we just see a red stains on onlookers' faces after the fact. That mean, naturally, the movie ended up being a solid hit when it released in the year 2000, taking in $53 million domestically and $113 million worldwide on a very modest budget of $12 million. So much as they had with the likes of with the likes of like I mentioned before, New Line had a new franchise on their hands, and of course, the first of many sequels almost followed 3 years later. Final Destination 2, released in 2003, he also solidifies that apart from the recurring appearance of Tony Todd as Bloodworth, with each of this rotating cast of characters making this something of an anthology, with the same basic premise that death comes for everyone in the end, but with different ways of carrying out that premise. As I will say, the opening freeway disaster is another effective one. On even setting aside the transmission fluid symbolically acting as blood before the lead sets off for their college road trip. Just the simple idea of being too close to a vehicle carrying an unstable load, or overlooking one minor detail during a maintenance check, being fatal, are indeed almost realistic. Living in Oregon, and I think I'd definitely say, at least to an extent, that this opening disaster is a subconscious reason why most drivers give these logging trucks a wide berth. I mean, I don't even say like I'm gonna try and catch the people just driving by in a regular car. Or I mean, admittedly, hey, there were some disasters that were a bit much. I mean, much like the elevator in this one. Nothing compared to what would follow the next couple, and it actually still managed to be another modest success as when it released. I mean, it's not a huge hit, but it took in $46 million domestically, and $90 million worldwide on $26 million budgets. So definitely enough to make its money back, but there was a slight dip from the previous installments. And the approach also justified following a basic idea, different cast of characters with each installment, being flexible, which is definitely very good, especially with what I'm about to explain with the next movie. 2006, Final Destination 3. I did not enjoy this one as much as the first two, though I'm not above admitting it does have its moments, and elements I do admittedly like. I mean, chief among them being an early film role for then unknown Elizabeth Winstead, who would later star in numerous beloved and entertaining projects. In my case, being Ramona Flowers in the Scott Pilgrim verse and bringing her back for the Netflix anime. But before that, she was one of a few college kids just narrowly avoided disaster on the Devil's Flight roller coaster, and yes, even I someone who is not an expert on design, I I know that this exact one would not played out the way it did. Even factoring in how he Carnival obviously would not have the same in capacity for this kind of coaster or that other bigger parks would. And there are parts that are obvious that it's not special effects. It's it's one of a few examples of a movie where I do not, not see this as feasibly happening to this extent in real life. I do, however, at least find it entertaining, albeit not always for reasons intended. This is another example where the dark comedy elements and get less intentional. But when it is intentional, it works pretty well. Case in point, where two blonde blondies in matching tracksuits and unmentionables go to get a tan, and they end up getting immolated to the OJ's roller coaster of love, of where figures if it's not the skin cancer that gets you in those it's spontaneous combustion. I also will say like the match cut from the tanning beds to their caskets also pretty clever. Or that's another thing I do like across the board. Like even sometimes a bit on the nose, who's that these movies are really good about giving you information visually a about some of the disasters. And again, it works the best when they could conceivably happen. And and all of us will be concerned about maybe going to a tanning salon and having something go wrong. On and same with the back into the hardware store. I actually looked into this movie's production as well. That the actor actually had to learn how to drive before forklift, as well as do some way where he could talk to their actors. You'd be surprised how many takes it took to get the hammers to fall in just the right way was asked to work. Like, even though I consider the epilogue of the train crash as my least favorite scene, the practical effects work in this one is actually quite solid. Especially with the weightlifter getting crushed by his own machine. For the reasons they show in the movie, bench press machines aren't built like that. They had to physically not only make the prop of the press, they also had to do it for a mold of the actor or Texas Battle. I don't know if that's just like a stage name, or if that was actually what he goes by. Either way, it's only fitting that an actor a name that ends up going out with a demise that's impressive. And of course, some of the more obnoxious as characters, seeing him get game ended, it is another way to have like a get out of emotional investment free card. Like the whole bit with you can just have them iced, and the story will have zero emotional repercussions for it. And I'm one of those people that just ends it on like the disaster at the fireworks show, which some people end up getting burnt up again. Some people end up getting crushed by horses that end up being spooked. And one of them, who was least of a character in the movie, ended up getting crushed by a giant sign. And love it or hate it, somewhere in between on this one. The film managed to make $54 million domestically and $119 million worldwide on a $12 million budget. Even like the home release ended up being quite popular, with a kind of like a branching past feature to see how some characters' fates would play out differently, based on certain actions being taken, and even getting their own little "Where Are They Now" cards based on choices you made. Nothing the most complex. I mean, it is just kind of like looking at alternate scenes or takes, but the way it's presented is a nice measure. Also, while Blow himself did not appear in this movie, Tony Todd still is the voice of the Devil's Flight icon on warning writers about their potential fates. Hey, let's just say when they say not to have loose objects like a camera on these rides, they really mean it. I'll give them that. And 2009 saw the release of the fourth film, The Final Destination, which, as implied, was meant to be the finale, at least at that time frame. And I'm gonna just come out and say this is my least favorite installment right here. Don't get me wrong, it's not without its moments I'm about to get into, but a lot of the character behaviors, how over the top some of the deaths got, it's started struggling with sense belief, and especially with how they push the 3D gimmick. I mean, it's less of what they were doing with other films the same year, such as Avatar, Up or Coraline, name a few, and more like stuff like Jaws 3D or Friday the 13th Part 3, both of which I previously covered. I mean, I did not particularly care much for Jaws 3D, but it was kind of funny, albeit not for the reasons they intended, and Friday the 13th Part 3 at least did establish Jason as we know him today, with the two things most associated with him: the machete weapon and the hockey mask to cover his disfigured, decayed face. This one, however, definitely he was trying and a bit too hard. Thankfully, it's only an hour and 20 minutes long, so it's not going to be a whole day if you do decide to watch it. And once again, they take some creative license with the opening stock car race disaster. I mean, there's no way that they would just peel out when there's visible oil slick in the pits, as I've seen in enough races to know that they go to cost or less than that. But the opening disaster is not the worst. I mean, there's the CG does provide an assist, but they actually, whenever there is real elements in there, it works more effectively. And the way that some people die is darkly humorous, as which is a kind of recurring thing in this movie. Like, I'm sorry, is this a horror movie or Happy Tree Friends cartoon I'm watching here? And I don't mean the one that make you watch when you get in hot water with the copyright system either. And with that in mind, just gonna go right ahead and tell everyone my favorite death scene in this movie, where the Proud Boy precursor so much ends up getting dragged and immolated by his own truck and chain. What explodes with Wars Why Can't We Be Friends playing the background music. I found that darkly humorous when this movie first came out in 2009, and this time frame even more so. Oh, as for the other guy who's in hospice, well, we don't physically see him buy it, but it's safe to say that he is likely in the bad place. And they also do indeed lampshade the whole 3D movie trend, and albeit, but based on how many explosions, no one accused that one of being a chick flick, and heck, even like the commemorative popcorn buckets, it's are kind of ahead of the curve there. I can only imagine how many ones we're going to be seeing that have Nick and Judy, or at least ones that are covered in pink and green, aiming for Zootopia and Wicked this year. I mean, and of course, like the the aggro guy from the country club of getting his guts sucked out by the pool's jet intake somehow. Oh, it's again, that's one has mixed feelings. On one hand, that was actually where I actually changed the channel when I first saw all this movie, because I didn't make it all the way through my first time for this one. Subsequent viewings, however, as well as revisiting it from all these internet review shows, I was able to get through it. And thanks to largely the 3D surcharge, the movie did manage to do mildly well. Help was $66 million domestically and $186 million worldwide on a $40 million budget. Whether or not they actually were going to stick to the previous one being a finale, this also caused interesting decisions to be made for Final Destination 5 2 years later in 2011. And even though I was skeptical, of course, given my dislike of the fourth film, though, as I just mentioned, you could make it into a decent dark comedy under the right circumstances. It actually improved a lot. I mean, again, it also, on top of bringing back Bloodworth, which the fourth one was the only a film of the initial run to not feature him. Though we did at least get Bubba from Forrest Gump's actor in there. I mean, I wonder if they got a shrimp recipe before he bought it. But still. And it also, the fifth one also had at the time the longest opening disaster of that one. And again, the 3D effects have improved a lot in this fifth one. And with the bridge disaster in particular, you need a mixture of both digital and practical effects work. I mean, so where the exact kind of stuff like the escalator, her grinding and not being, and also like having like a truck crash into a coffee house, that's just unlikely. But a bridge collapsing is a feasible enough one that audiences could simultaneously think it could happen to you, and also for it to look good on screen. And some of the things even to do with the costuming and the technology in the movie also give you an indicator that something is simultaneously familiar but off. I mean, for me, especially as the progresses more and more, and more people get close to the end. I mean, like there are offices that have flat panel TV displays and computer monitors, but most people still have those big boxes CRTs of how costly such ones were at the time. There are people who do have phones, but not everyone does, and they're more like old style flip phones, some which have like external antennae, as opposed to the more technologically elaborate ones starting to supersede them. and especially the way that the characters dress, and some of them even have like frosted tips in their hair. I mean, which also all comes together in the denouement where they get on the plane, but then we see again the person getting ejected from the beginning of the first film, and then the other passenger looks at his ticket, which is the same date and flight number from the opening one, which actually means that this movie functionally ends right where the original Final Destination begins. They even did a good job recreating tavern set from that first film, even having the exact kind of lights and the glasses hanging from the ceiling in there. And it ends fittingly on a highlight reel of some of the most memorable disasters from the other movies, set to ACDC If You Want Blood, You Got It. Though it did have a slight hit in the domestic box office from the previous film at $43 million. Because it had the same $40 million budget, it still managed to turn an okay profit at $158 million worldwide. With that in mind, and the time for the franchise to take a break was needed. There were rumblings as early as 2022 that they're going to bring it back as a Max original. However, the regime change from Haynes to W Discovery actually did something actually somewhat decent. They actually saw potential in the story and had that retold in a full theatrical release with the budget to match, which brings us to the last movie in this video. So, this year saw the release of Final Destination Bloodlines, and even though I was skeptical about its prospects of legacy sequels, at least, the more I heard about it, the more I actually got intrigued by it. In fact, while audiences as a whole have been much kinder to the franchise than the press have, it did actually become the most uniformly well-received installment, being the first one ever to actually get a uniformly positive critical response. In fact, that, and it actually does shake up the formula in interesting ways. Is with the Skyview restaurant and club, a no edifice for harmed version of the Seattle Space Needle being our opening disaster this time, which also connects to the main plot. Like, rather than doing a bunch of friends in college this time, it's actually a family who was touched by a distant relative. Have seen the literal collapse of the tower before it happened, but as a result, well, ends up impacting their entire family for years to come. And when Nana correctly says that death is coming for them all because of what happened, and actually adds more weight to the story, and also, it's not the first horror legacy sequel to use generational trauma as plot device, but it is one of the more effective ones I've seen happen, where a lot of people became estranged from each other. It's also made the lead such a wreck that's impacting her studies negatively, as well as her relationships with others. And once again, and while some deaths do get a bit Rube Goldberg-ish, there are some ways it can be believable. Of the idea that whether it's in the 60s or this year, that someone will just brush off concerns earns for actually relatively flimsy reasons, only to be proven fatally wrong about their oversights, is again quite realistic. Where it was very effective of advertising, because I definitely saw more than a few both online on traditional formats, especially the first Red Band trailer set to actually a very good cover of Without You by Harry Nilsson, and how their family reunion barbecue ends up claiming a few with accidents involving like a lawnmower, a piece of glass that got mixed in with some of the cocktails, ales, and a worn out trampoline. And, and now we come to who, and especially given how before the Nana died, she left her granddaughter her scrapbook, which contains, of course, some most memorable disasters from the previous installments. Once the plane crash Flight 180 in the first film, the freeway disaster in the second, the Devil's Flight collapse in the third, the racetrack disaster in the fourth, and the bridge collapse in the fifth one I just talked about, name a few. Which also brings us to this being like the final appearance of Bloodworth, as at the time of filming, Tony Todd had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, even though none of us knew at the time. He certainly did. And the way he relays the information to both the characters and the audience, way he glanced at the camera, that some of the lines were not in the script. They were actually improvised on the set by Tony, which I give him capacity to do. I mean, in a way, it shows he had made peace with the fact that he was not alone with this world, and also kind of adds weight to the theory that he was actually the Angel of Death in his human form, or in the case of the third movie, using the Devil's Flight icon on his vessel. Well, to me and others, he didn't truly die. He just has put on his cloak, picked up a scythe, and went on to his next line of work. And he's been involved with a lot of things I've enjoyed, with things from Spider-Man to Transformers, even Candyman being affected by Todd. His voice and face were indeed quite recognizable, and this being his last appearance in one of his iconic roles, it was a good one to go out on. Likewise, this film is indeed as good as I have heard, and naturally ended up becoming the most successful installment of the franchise by a landslide, actually outgrossing multiple installments opening weekend, and the others being their entire domestic runs, and multiple others I just mentioned. The film ultimately took in $138 million domestically and $315 million worldwide, with a seventh installment currently in early development with the same creative source in this film involved. Yeah, and with that, another Halloween horror treat is in the goodie bag. There will be others to talk about, and now that I basically spent this weekend binging 6 hard R horror films that fit that bar on their grisly scenes alone. This time I'll be talking about something a bit more family friendly, albeit one that's also actually means a lot to me. Even if not everyone might be inclined to agree, but I won't hold against them. Okay? Bye. I love you.